Hello and welcome to Making Creativity Pay, the podcast where we speak to people in a range of creative industries about how they try and make a living from their work. This episode's guest is Sophie Cross, founder and editor of Freelancer magazine. I talked to Sophie about her background in marketing and communications, starting a magazine from scratch using Kickstarter, build a community of freelancers and her online courses. Thanks very much for coming on the podcast. It's great to have you on. Kind of a range of things it'd be great to talk about. So magazine, your newsletter, LinkedIn training. So I mean there's so much stuff. But if we kind of start at the beginning, and your background was much more initially in freelance marketing, copywriting, that kind of thing. So how did you kind of get started initially?
So yeah, my background was really in marketing. So from my employed life, I was mainly working in the hospitality industry. So I was working for brands like Hilton, and then I went to the resort marketing manager at Chessington World of Adventures. But I'd always had this kind of fire in me to start my own business, and I was always trying to think of different ideas. And one day on my commute to work, I was thinking, well, actually, if I went freelance as a marketer, then, that would I would be setting up my own business, but it wouldn't, I already know about being a marketer, and also the startup costs are quite low. I had quite a lot of connections because I'd worked for lots of different companies at that point. So yeah, I took the leap to go freelance. It was 9 years ago now. Sort of marketing strategy, brand strategy, and then the work that I was being asked to do went into a lot of content-led work, went into a lot of copywriting-led work, which I wasn't really expecting. But, as is always the way, you kind of look back on these things and think, oh, actually, I did really enjoy that aspect of the work. And yeah, I had started a newsletter. So it's the same newsletter I write now, actually. But, it was like 100 people, and it's taken so many different iterations. But yeah, I started a newsletter. So I suppose that was kind of putting my writing out there to the first kind of 100 people that, I forced to subscribe to it. And yeah, so that was 9 years ago. And I was working for the travel and hospitality industry mainly. Copywriting, content writing, some marketing, and then lost basically all of my work, or like most of my client work, when the pandemic hit. So that kind of takes us up to, I can't even remember what year it is anymore. I think I said 2019 the other day and I meant 2020, but I think that takes us up to 2020.
When you started to go freelance, did you have any problems in terms of how you perceived it could be you doing exactly the same thing within an agency or a big corporation versus doing it freelance? But did then the end client kind of either expect to get it for a fraction of the price, or quicker, or even have difficulty in kind of trusting you to do it?
I think I was quite lucky in that a lot of my work came from ex-employers or ex-colleagues, or they recommended me onto other people. So where I'd worked for sort of, maybe 3 big hospitality brands, and then some of those people had kind of left and gone to other brands. I started getting work that way, and I suppose there was a degree of having to be really flexible. So kind of, especially because I just started out, it felt like, I would just do any work. If you wanted me to update a database for you, or update some like website listings, or if you wanted me to project manage a brand, like a rebrand, or if you wanted me to do some Facebook posts, I was kind of just willing to do anything at that point. But I don't know if I was expected. I think the flexibility of work and I probably wasn't charging enough, but at the same time, you're just so thrilled at that point that you're getting work. And that you can work from home, or you can work from where you want. There's more of a degree of flexibility with your time that I didn't ever really feel like, oh, I'm not, they're expecting me to do it for cheaper. I just felt like I had to be flexible, but that I was getting benefits from it as well.
So you said that the arrival of the pandemic effectively kind of crushed your workload. I mean, did you have the magazine kind of in the back of your head all the time, and it was just, oh, well, I'll do that sometime, or did it kind of just start from the pandemic happening?
So I didn't have the idea for the magazine at all. I had been making a magazine with Angela, who is our designer for Freelancer magazine now. So we'd been making a magazine for Park Plaza Hotels, which was a bi-monthly magazine. It went in all their hotels in London. It was like a London-based events guide. It went in some venues along the South Bank, and that got pulled at the beginning of the pandemic, understandably. But yeah, I still at that point didn't have the idea for the magazine. I just moved back to London. So we were living in Exmoor for 6 years, me and my husband, and we just decided to move back to London. He was a plumber, but he was struggling to get kind of progress with his career down there. He'd just retrained. And I had been kind of really happy working down there, doing copywriting projects, was working for kind of brands like lastminute.com, but just kind of had felt my work was plateauing. And we decided to move back to London and just thought, you know, we're both going to really go for it kind of career-wise. And I was really looking forward to kind of taking my freelance sort of marketing career to the next level. And I was thinking, I might start some sort of hospitality marketing event or something like that. And that was February, March 2020. And then, yeah, like within a month or so, it was just like I didn't really have any work. And I started first making the online courses. So I started making online marketing courses. And because I knew at that point, I was like, right, I'm going to make online marketing courses. I'm just going to go for it. It's going to be really nice for me to learn like a new type of software. I was actually doing a course at the time, a strategy course, Mark Pollard's strategy course, and I knew he was using Thinkific, and I was really enjoying using it as a user. So I thought, do you know what? I could actually use my marketing knowledge and put it out there into different courses using this software. And I felt like it would be quite cathartic to kind of get all that out of my head and sort it out, and that I probably either needed to target hospitality industry professionals or freelancers and small businesses, because those were my areas of expertise. And I was like, I did start doing a little bit of stuff for hospitality industry, but then because I wasn't getting any work from that industry, I was like, yeah, maybe this isn't the industry. I don't know. Maybe that would have been quite a good time for people to kind of do courses, but it wasn't the feedback I was getting at the time. You know, it was the very start of the pandemic. People were just kind of, you know, maybe not panicking, but the hospitality industry was having to pivot like so quickly and so much, and just had no idea what was going on, that they were not thinking about kind of, you know, upskilling necessarily. Sure. So I decided to target them at freelancers, and I was already quite a big part of freelance communities online and on social media. And it just went from there. I became like a bigger part of those communities because I was putting stuff out there. I made a couple of really short free courses. Everyone was really supportive, like extra supportive, because, you know, everyone was really online at that point. And I just started really listening to where I was part of these communities before, and you might go in and you might kind of just be having a bit of a laugh or asking for some help. I started really listening to like, okay, well, what problems are people having? Like what problems are people having marketing themselves? Because I knew that if I could help solve those problems, like my courses would be more popular. And it was sort of through that I realized there wasn't a magazine for freelancers, like being sort of a bigger part of those communities. I was like, I don't know. It was actually New Year's Day 2021. So it was just over a year ago. I was like, there's like, maybe I could make a magazine for freelancers. And that was that, really.
And in terms of the magazine, I mean, it's quite a step, especially in the current world, to go for a print version. Did you consider maybe doing online magazines, you know, kind of more website activity? Or did you just think, no, if I'm going to do it, I want it to be a real thing?
Yeah, and I think that like I'm a very all or nothing person anyway, but the idea actually came from, I was kind of creating my content plans for the courses, and I was really thinking, okay, how am I going to stand out? Like, how am I going to create content that stands out, that like is helpful for people, that people are going to kind of have a chance to read, that's going to help them market themselves, that's going to position me as someone who knows about how to help freelancers market themselves. So that positions me as someone who knows about, freelancing, kind of a go-to person. And I was just thinking, well, like podcasting didn't really, it wasn't jumping out at me as something that I wanted to do. Then you were kind of thinking, well, blogs and newsletters, like I already had a newsletter. Blogging just didn't seem to, be something that was going to cut through stuff that I was already doing. And so the whole idea from the magazine came from the fact that it would stand out because it was going to be print, because it was going to be posted through people's letterboxes, so they would find it harder to ignore. And I just, if magazines online are done really well, then they are amazing. But I was kind of like, couldn't get over the fact that essentially it's sort of a blog sometimes.
So when you decided, right, it's going to be a real thing, was Kickstarter the first place you looked, the only place you looked, or did you kind of look at other options?
Yeah, I knew it would be Kickstarter, and I'm not sure why. Like, I hadn't used it before I'd only used it before to support. I hadn't used it, to set up a campaign. But I just sort of knew it. I think, I sort of say that there was probably what I feel was a bit of a perfect mix of kind of experience at this point, because I had been kind of in business for quite a long time, and sort of desperation as well. This kind of perfect storm of, having clarity, because I just knew I'd set up quite a few little businesses before. I'd written probably, 100 business plans, and I was like, I want to know people want this before I make it. Like, there's no point in me making this magazine. And also, I wanted people to feel like they were part of it from the very beginning. I didn't just want to go out there and say, hey, I've made this magazine, do you want to buy it? And also that sense of urgency that comes with Kickstarter. So all these things from kind of my marketing brain, like, was just thinking, well, like, Kickstarter would tick that box. You're basically giving people whatever period of time, and you're giving yourself that period of time, whether it's a month or, ours was 5 weeks with kind of a month, maybe a bit less pre-launch. And you just give yourself that time to, like, absolutely go for it, just to tell people, like, this is what we're planning. This is what we want to know from you. Do you want it? You need to tell me this month if you do, and then we'll make it. So, yeah, it was always going to be Kickstarter. It was just like, it just felt right.
Yeah. And so your initial aim was 12,750 and 4 quarterly issues over a year. Did you have much discussion about, the level of funding, the number of initial ones? You didn't just say, fund me for my, one issue, one and done. You're quite ambitious to go for 4, and then obviously that's quite a commitment from your side as well.
I suppose, I don't know. I just suppose I felt, I don't know if I knew this at the time, but definitely looking back, I think, to have to do that every time just wouldn't have been possible, right? So, like, I know people could have kind of signed up, but I think one of the things, like, publishing is hard, like, print is hard. By no means am I making, like, loads and loads of money from it now. Like, we're turning over, and I think that we will get there, but it's not like I'm going to retire anytime soon. It's still stressful. But I do look back now and think, if we hadn't kind of set it up initially as a kind of subscription model, if we hadn't said, like, committed to saying, like, we're going to put out 4 issues, it's going to be quarterly, then I think that would have been, it just would have been impossible for us to make enough money at all. Like, if we had to keep going after every issue to, like, start from scratch. So I think I knew that we had to commit beyond, like, 1 issue. And also because at that point, as soon as the Kickstarter ended, I wanted to set up like an option for people to subscribe. So I knew that we had to kind of go beyond one. And I just suppose I just saw it being like that. Like, if people do want it, if they do want one, like why would we not kind of keep going? But yeah, I think I thought for about 5 seconds about making it monthly and decided not to. And then I'm really, really glad that I made it quarterly now.
So within the Kickstarter, you had a number of tiers. So someone could buy digital only, buy one issue, subscribe to all 4, have issues plus advertising. I mean, did you think a lot about both the number of tiers and the pricing structure? Or I mean, did you see the kind of, £10 an issue kind of felt right in your head?
Because it was really just me, it was really difficult. Like, it was really difficult to decide what our target would be and what I would charge and how I would work that out. And I did speak to a couple of other people, so I had support, and I still am a member of the International Magazine Centre. So they're a little organisation based in Scotland, and Nikki, who runs it, was really helpful in just having some chats with me. And I also found a crowdfunding consultant called Jo Breeze. And I used to have, actually throughout the Kickstarter, but before, I also sort of rang her about a week before, just being like, help, I have no idea what to set this amount as. And she was absolutely amazing. And then I paid her to have like one call with her throughout the Kickstarter, just to like keep me accountable, to have someone else to talk to, because I was doing it on my own and I was just driving my husband insane. Yeah, and like, to be honest, probably the first amount I came up with, like plucked off the top of my head, was like, oh, like maybe I'll set it at like $6,000, and I don't think I can charge more than like £8 for a magazine. Like, that's the maximum amount I can charge. And you just start sort of doing the figures and thinking, and it's really hard to work out, because you could get to the amount, but only by selling one type of package, right? So for instance, I could have hit my target, but only sold issue 1, like everyone, like it's pretty unlikely, right? So you have to start thinking, okay, what would be the worst case scenario here? Like, what would be the absolute worst case scenario? And that was kind of how I started working it out. And yeah, I kind of, as the weeks went on, the amount that I was going to set a target, it was still massively kind of putting my finger in the air, but I sort of just grew, I guess, a little bit more confidence to up that amount a little bit. Just kept trying to do the sums as much as I could, like working out, get as many, all of your costs in, as, I don't know, I suppose we were quite, it made it a lot easier for us because we only sold the magazine through the Kickstarter. So we weren't selling like lots of different, like we didn't have to deliver like lots of different types of merch or anything like that. So the digital copy, we knew that was just like, we use a platform called Issue. So, that didn't have a cost associated to it apart from the Issue membership. The advertising packages, like there wasn't a cost to that was literally just finger in the air. Like our advertising rates, we were selling a full page for like 125 quid, and at the same time the magazine didn't exist at that point. So it was amazing. We sold out of advertising, and of course the rates were really good, but at the same time we didn't have any subscribers at that when some people started buying advertising. But yeah, we only had to deliver the magazine. So really we were kind of like print, design, post and packaging, which you put in separately into Kickstarter. But something to really bear in mind in Kickstarter is your post and packaging costs count towards your total. So you can actually kind of hit your total a lot faster if, you've also got to take into account things like post and packaging, and just be really careful with that, because you can just be like, you just really have to do those numbers. And I would say, like, if you can get someone else to look over them too, and yeah, just keep losing sleep over it until you go live.
You kind of smashed the target. You probably had 150% almost of of your initial goal. If you hadn't have hit it, if you'd have say got to 10 grand, would that been enough for you to kind of say, well, there's definitely something here? Or would you have just gone, well, no, that's it, walk away from it?
Yeah, I don't know. I think there was always going to be a figure, wasn't there, where you probably, were going to have put 500 quid in or something like that. I don't know what that figure would have been exactly. Like, I suppose, it feels like if it went, well, I don't know, 10 to 12 and 12,700 is still quite a big gap, isn't it? But I suppose, if it was like, if we were 500 quid short or a bit more, like I would have probably chucked that money in myself. But, it goes, that last 24 hours is just crazy as well. Like, they always say in Kickstarter, like kind of the first 24 hours and the last 24 hours. But yeah, the first, until we hit the goal, it's just a massive gamble, right? Because everyone's kind of behind you. Like, everyone wanted it to succeed, and then of course it slows down once we hit that target. It slowed down, but it was incredible to hit it. I think we hit it, can't remember exactly now, but I think it was about a week, maybe 10 days into like a 5-week campaign. But yeah, then at the end it kind of went crazy as well, and you kind of think, because I was sending out about 50 tweets a day, you just think there can't be anyone that doesn't know about this yet. But of course, like, that sense of urgency at the end when people are like, oh, I really, this is really the last chance to get it. So yeah, I think we'd set a stretch goal at that point. I can't remember exactly what it was now. I think we'd set a stretch goal of like 17.5 or something, and we just hit that like at the very last minute. Looking back, again, obviously getting the funds up front to make the magazine, like I always talk about the Kickstarter, and I talk about, it was really important for it to be a Kickstarter for me because, I wanted to get people involved early. I wanted to know that people wanted it. I wanted to create that sense of urgency. But actually, you can't make any bones about the fact that having the money up front, like, again, it would have been completely impossible, really. And kind of looking at the costs as also associated with kind of starting a business. Obviously, we spent way more money like this year than was anticipated, as is always the way. And yeah, I think that comes from having a longer term view over it as well. So, we bought the trademark for Freelancer magazine. We spent quite a lot of money getting, we have an email newsletter called The Dunker. So I spent quite a lot of money getting that kind of like professionally coded and designed, and all stuff that kind of was with a longer term view to making, instead of just, but that kind of wouldn't have been possible without, we wouldn't still be here today if we hadn't done Kickstarter. Or I don't think it just would have been impossible to start a magazine without having that money up front.
Edition 4 is just about to drop at the end of January. So that kind of covers the initial Kickstarter period. You mentioned about getting people to subscribe beyond that. So for issue 5, do you see Kickstarter possibly coming back to kind of give it another boost, or do you think it kind of lives or dies on the subscription model now?
Yeah, it kind of lives or dies. I mean, I wouldn't say never again for Kickstarter. Like, if we were to do, like, I don't know if it will be next year. I was thinking it might be next year, but I would like to do a bigger event or like a festival. And I think if we did something like that, then I might use Kickstarter again. But, I guess that at that point, though, there's no reason why you couldn't create some sort of, do something similar. Like, you could have early bird offers and you wouldn't necessarily need to use that platform, because Kickstarter do take like quite a big percentage as well. So, you have to consider that. But yeah, I would recommend using Kickstarter. I wouldn't not use it. I suppose if you've just already grown an audience at that point or a community, then, there are benefits from going through Kickstarter and there are not. So when we started getting subscriptions and, selling direct individually from as soon as the Kickstarter was over. So we have revenue coming in from that already, and hopefully the majority of people that signed up for issues 1 to 4 that paid kind of upfront for those 4 issues will convert to subscribers through like after issue 4 has landed.
Do you kind of see the goal of trying to have some kind of tie-up with, whether it's Federation of Small Businesses or Institute of Marketing or whoever it would be, to kind of work with those to kind of say, well, I guess, you've still got the fixed cost per issue, but that the cost per issue will decrease. If they suddenly said, right, we want 5,000 copies, is the aim to kind of try and get some sort of partnership, or do you think it's very much more kind of one-to-one with individual freelancers?
I don't know. I mean, never say never. I've never gone down the retail. We have a few really small retailers, like indie retails, but I've been really, really focused on having that direct relationship, selling direct through our own website. Yeah, and just having that direct relationship, having like a two-way relationship with our readers. So selling the most magazines possible was never like the goal, as quickly as possible. And it was never I never wanted it to be like, okay, well, let's get our subscription numbers or our like circulation numbers up as much as possible, because then we'll attract advertisers. I just felt like those as strategies were gonna start, like we would start coming unstuck. And I saw that, I thought that was why a lot of the publishing industry had started to struggle, because they were focusing too much on kind of false circulation figures to attract advertisers. And I always wanted it, to stay, as the reader being the customer. And also because I thought that would appeal to advertisers more. Like, it was going to be better for us to have like a smaller, really engaged audience than it was to have a big one. So yeah, the main focus has always been just building individual relationships and building that kind of direct relationship. Yeah, I suppose it's also felt like we're so new, or certainly last year, we were just trying to work out like what content was working, what people liked. Like I still feel like really, really new. So I think to kind of talk to other people about kind of partnerships, like, yeah, I mean, hopefully we will get much bigger, but I suppose it's just about kind of making sure that we've got our values and like our like business model and everything in place before we start bringing other people in.
You've mentioned, as well as the magazine, you do online courses. Some are free, some are paid. I've talked to some people on previous episodes about that, about kind of going from free to pay. And, it's such a big leap on anything digital and online when there's so much stuff out there that is free. In the nicest possible way, I kind of said on that episode, how do you justify charging?
I mean, so what happened with me was that I was focusing on the courses was going well, and I came up with the idea for the magazine January last year, and then I didn't, like, my foot completely came off the gas with the courses because it all became about the magazine, even though ironically the idea for the magazine originally came about because it was meant to be a way to promote the courses. But I am now, hence the new microphone. I'm now getting back on the courses because I want them to work alongside the magazine, and there'll be a really good revenue stream for us. And I was getting really good response for them. But it was also a bit like, because you are videoing yourself, it's like out of my comfort zone. So as soon as I had an excuse not to make them anymore, I was like, okay, I'll just focus on the magazine. I still, like, we're just about to launch events, and I still have that kind of money, like, should we be charging for certain types of events? Like, some I don't think we should, and it is about kind of giving added value, and it is about connecting people in the community to each other. But you have to have that kind of base level of, like, you can't expect people just to, like, start paying for your newsletter or start paying for things without kind of dipping their toe in and finding out about you. But at the same time, you do realize that, I'm literally spending all my time researching, creating content, that you have to earn money at some point. So I guess the other thing is, and I really do believe it's true, is that people do not value free stuff, really. They don't. And I suppose we're quite lucky with the magazine and with the courses, because the goal behind them is to, help people grow their businesses. It is to kind of help people earn more money if that's their goal, or help people to kind of make better use of their time. So there is like you can almost see a direct ROI if you look for it. So it's easier for me to think, okay, I'm charging £10 for this magazine. I mean, I do really believe it's worth it. It's a 100-page magazine. It's lovely quality. It's packed full of stuff. But also I'm thinking, if you don't get £10 of value from this magazine that you can kind of put into your business, then like, I'll give you the money back myself. That is kind of the case. So I think you really have to think about the value that you're creating for other people. And again, like with the courses, because I do a course about LinkedIn, people are seeing a direct kind of ROI. People are, you're thinking, okay, well, this course is now £100, but if you get one new client, like that has more than paid for itself, right? It's more also about making sure that you're creating a course that people are going to enjoy, people are going to complete, people are going to be able to apply to because if you create a course, however much someone pays for it, but people aren't completing it, then that's not going to give them value. Charge more though, I'd say. It's so hard though. But I still really do struggle with it, in terms of like, oh God, if we have an event, and should it be free, or should we ask people for £5, or it is tricky.
I mean, what I found personally in the past is that if you have it free, you'll get loads of sign-ups, and then, between 30 or 50% of people will turn up.
Absolutely, yeah.
If you charge, even if it's a £5, it kind of gets that, it just leaves you with the serious people.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I mean, almost then the other way, if you only charge a £5, they kind of think, well, it can't be that good. It's only a £5. There's a whole branch of economics around, kind of where you price things. If you made the same thing £20 instead of £5, people perceive, it's a £20 event, it will be good.
I was going to say that also comes back to you as well, doesn't it? Because you think, well, if I'm charging £20 for this, like I'm, spending what it is, but the more you charge for it, the better you want to make it as well, right? Like the more time you're going to be able to dedicate to it. And so, but I think it is about having kind of tiers as well, right? Of kind of tiers of pricing and something that whether that's a newsletter or, your social media content, that can be your free level.
You've kind of mentioned newsletter, the magazine and so on. I mean, have you thought, and the online courses, have you thought about podcasts both as promoting the other things and almost as a kind of an audio course, effectively?
Oh, I kind of have to, just like have to stop somewhere. So I think about this a lot, like at the moment, because I'm sort of putting in plans in place for this year, and I'm reading this book by Oliver Burkeman called 4,000 Weeks, which I thought was going to be all about, making the most of your time, and you've only got limited time, but it's actually kind of like a bit of an anti-productivity, like you're never going to get everything done, so you've got to just stop thinking that you are and just choose a few things to do well, like by and large, and I'm really, really enjoying it. And so I think, having not made any more courses last year, to think about adding something like a podcast would be just too much for my brain to handle right now. But the focus is on continuing to make the best magazine possible, making more courses, social media. So LinkedIn is our best channel for kind of selling the magazine and getting it out there. So making upping my kind of content game across LinkedIn, across Twitter. And the next thing, and it lends itself, I guess, kind of naturally to like my skill set and what I like to do is going to be creating events. And I think and some workshop type things. So kind of live, I guess they would kind of be live type kind of courses. And I think, maybe if we record those, and I was thinking about doing some expert Q&As, but probably not in a podcast, probably more like putting them on YouTube or something like that. So that's my plan.
An awful lot for the next 12 months then.
Yeah, that's me limiting myself. Yeah.
I saw on another interview you did, you said, you've got like kind of hundreds of URLs that, domains that you've kind of bought for ideas and things. Is there anything that kind of keeps bubbling back to the top that you think, oh, one day I'd love to do that? I mean, example of mine, I've got Fine Wine Online as a website domain. I think it's more the name first, business second. But I mean, is there anything that you kind of think, oh, if only I had the time, I'd crack on with that one?
So I am feeling really focused, like I am, but I do think like I won't be doing the magazine forever. I think I'd love to like give it a real good crack for like 3 years or 5 years and see how far I can take it. And then, it's not necessarily about even setting up another business. Like I'd like to, go and be a cheese intern or something like that. Or like, I think about being a spinning instructor or like having a boxing fight or something, like I think of ideas the whole time. I've actually let most of my URLs go, mainly because they were absolute crap. And yeah, also because I have a thing where I have to kind of like get rid of everything, like I have to kind of start again and just kind of clear out all the weeds and just like start from a blank canvas. So yeah, I don't know. I think there is power in just letting go. Like if something is going to resurface in the future, like I do always talk about, I had a business plan for like Stinky's Cheese Shop, and I do think maybe one day that will happen, which would actually work really well with your fine wines. So, but I'm just kind of like, do you know what? If I, I'm lucky enough to make it to 60 or something, and I still want to set up a cheese shop, then we'll do it then. But for now, like let's focus on what we're doing and just eat loads of cheese.
Okay. On the newsletter, I think on a recent edition, you talked about possibly moving to Substack.
Yes.
You use MailChimp currently. I mean, have you looked at other ones such as Review, and there's like a dozen of different ones that each have got pros and cons, and yeah, you just kind of think, well, it's just sending an email out. Why do I want to move it, and what can I do differently?
I don't do that because I never ever do that. What I do is I see something shiny and I go, and then I jump, and then I delete. Like that's what I do. I can't be doing with all this research and everything, because I always sort of think you could spend all your time doing the research, but actually, A, that's going to take time, and B, you're just probably going to be like obsessing then over like, oh well, if I've then a month down the line, am I going to think I still made the right decision? So I like to just go for it. Because someone did tell me this morning about something called a platform called Ghost. I don't know, have you heard of that?
Yes. I was kind of looking to set up a newsletter. So I've got data is everywhere is my plan for the newsletter. So, as always with these things, done one edition and need to be a bit more disciplined about the various things. And so I've gone for Review mainly because it links with Twitter. So you can just have it at the top of your Twitter feed, in your bio, subscribe. And so, it's much less of an issue of getting someone to join. But yes, there's Ghost, there's Substack, MailChimp. And yeah, you could easily spend a couple of days working out which one's the best. And if you just picked one, went with it, and used those couple of days to do something else, that probably, to be perfectly honest, is a better use of your time.
Yeah, now you've got me thinking though, because I did look at Ghost, and Ali Abdaal uses Ghost, and I'm quite a big Ali Abdaal fan, and I was like, Ali Abdaal uses Ghost. And now you've said about that Twitter thing, I have seen that on people's Twitter profiles, and that does look really cool. But so the reason I thought about moving to Substack was because my friend Nick Parker told me that like it's just so usable, so you kind of just want to, like, it makes you want to create your newsletter because you can just type in there and then it's kind of automatically saved and it's just really easy. So that really appealed to me over MailChimp, which I've been using for like 10 years. I paid for Paul Jarvis's Chimp Essentials course. I paid loads of money for our Freelancer magazine email to be coded in it. So I think I will definitely leave Freelancer magazine in MailChimp, which I know sounds really messy, but because this is for kind of my personal newsletter, I don't think having a different platform would make too much difference. And I suppose it's kind of good to try these different things in the name of research. And I do kind of like the fact that Substack and other platforms like that are starting to kind of normalize newsletters being paid for and things like that. Like, not that I think that I'm going to start charging or not anytime soon, but I think that's kind of cool that people can be monetizing like that.
So I mean, as a freelancer, I know you use a variety of tools for different things. I think in one of the emails recently you mentioned Notion, which again looks like quite a cool tool. So I mean, if you had to kind of name your top 3 tools or sites that you use for productivity and freelancing, what would they be?
So, yeah, Notion I use for planning. I spend my life just rewriting plans a lot of the time. But I really love Notion. Again, I got into Notion about a year or 2 ago through Ali Abdul. He had a video. I don't really watch anything else. I just watch one video and then I'm like, okay, cool, I'm done now. I'm just going to use this. But he had a video called How I Use Notion for My Resonance Calendar. And it was just a really cool way to use it. So it's the way, and I use it for exactly the same thing now. So any blog I read, any webinar, any podcast, any book, I use that template to kind of record the notes. And actually, I don't yet end up going back to those notes, but I find that process of recording what's resonated with you when you have listened to a podcast or you have listened to read a book or something. I find that process just helps sort your thoughts out and helps make you realize what is important to you and what your values are or what you want to talk about in your own content. So yeah, I love Notion. I use Notion for that. I use it for like loads of different things. So I use it for my like social media calendar, social media plans, content, like just jotting down content ideas, lists, all sorts of things. I suppose I couldn't really be without Squarespace. I've built all I would love to have a bespoke website built and hopefully that will happen one day, but I build kind of all my websites in Squarespace. And I suppose it's the classic thing of like, once you learn how to use a certain platform like that, and then like not being crazy techie, like you start to feel like a bit of a genius. So then they kind of have you sucked in, right? Because you're like, I know how to build websites now. So yeah, you build all my websites at Squarespace, and I don't know, like I suppose the third tool I would use, just cheating a little bit, but like Thinkific, MailChimp, but I've just talked about thinking about moving away from MailChimp. So yeah, Thinkific for my courses. Again, I didn't do any research. But, I'm not sure it would have made that much difference as I was using it as a user. I just decided that, as I knew how to use it really well as a user, that it would make most sense for me to use it. And I enjoyed using it. So, yeah, I use Thinkific to build my courses, and I've always found it really kind of intuitive and, done everything that I've wanted to do with it. And then I use Zapier. I haven't looked at Zapier for ages, but I use Zapier, which also made me feel like a genius, to like connect all these different platforms. Because I have started thinking about, I know there's these like membership platforms and stuff now that you can kind of do all these different things together, right? You can create your sales landing pages, and you can create your database and your email newsletter and your website. And I was just sort of thinking, oh yeah, like maybe that would be easier. But I think I like the fact that platforms specialize in certain areas. I feel that if you're going to get something that does all of it, it's going to do none of it well. And I haven't used those platforms, so do quote me on that. But yeah, I was kind of like, being drawn a little bit. And I was like, do you know what? No, like everything seems to connect okay with Zapier or just directly to each other. So yeah.
Huge thanks to Sophie for her time and great answers. You can find Sophie on Twitter @FullyThoughtOut, the magazine website freelancermagazine.co.uk, and there's also a range of other links in the show notes, including Sophie's newsletter, The Dunker.